Hello everyone, welcome to the Monopolistic competition practice quiz video. This video is going to be based on material coming from the first half of chapter 10 in the OpenStax textbook. Now, just like the last practice quiz video that I posted, there will be some questions that I asked you guys. You will have the opportunity to pause the video, and then the last part of the video will be me going through all the answers to the questions. Now, just like the last video, the answers that I give are going to be relatively concise. If you want more thorough explanations or where these answers are actually coming from, I do recommend that you go back and watch the videos from this section again, or take a look at the lecture notes on your own. So if you're able to answer these questions relatively easily, then you can take that as a signal that you are retaining this information quite well. If you don't do so well answering these questions, it might be a signal that you should spend a little bit more time watching the videos, taking notes on the videos, or even stopping by my office hours so that I can help you out one-on-one. So, can you answer these questions dealing with monopolistically competitive firms? What are some notable characteristics of monopolistically competitive firms? How does a monopolistically competitive firm initially choose its profit-maximizing quantity and price? Does a monopolistically competitive firm make long-run economic profits? And then finally, what are some pros and cons of advertising from an economist's point of view? So here would be the point in the video that you can pause and try to answer those questions on your own. Once you have taken the time to answer the questions on your own, you can continue the video to see my answers to these questions. Welcome back. Hopefully you've taken the time to answer these questions on your own. So let's go through my answers to these questions. So the first question I asked was, what are some notable characteristics of monopolistically competitive firms? And I think you could kind of summarize the characteristics of monopolistically competitive firms into like three main points. The first one being that there are many firms in monopolistically competitive settings. That's very similar to perfect competition in a way. Remember, in perfect competition, there were also lots and lots of different businesses all selling the same product. The key difference between perfect competition and monopolistic competition is that monopolistically competitive firms are all selling differentiated products. So perfect competition, they're all selling the exact same good, the exact same kind of wheat, whatever. But monopolistically competitive firms are selling products that are just a little bit different from one another. So, for example, Nike sells Nike shoes. Adidas sells Adidas shoes. Even though they're both shoes, they're two different types of shoes. So there are many firms selling just slight different, variations of products. And because of this, slight differentiation of products that would, in some cases, otherwise be the same if it wasn't for the brand, this opens the door for a lot of advertising by these firms. So because, Nike is competing with Adidas, even though they're both selling shoes, Nike and Adidas have to compete on some other margin. So this kind of opens the door for Nike and Adidas to run ads for these different types of shoes. So the second question I asked was, how does a monopolistically competitive firm initially choose its profit-maximizing quantity and price? So When a monopolistically competitive firm is deciding the quantity to sell and the price to charge, because it is kind of like its own little monopoly. Nike has kind of like a monopoly on Nike shoes. Adidas has a monopoly on Adidas shoes. These two firms can kind of independently behave like a monopoly at first. So choosing the price and the quantity for a monopolistically competitive firm is exactly the same as what a monopoly would do. They would produce the quantity where marginal revenue is equal to marginal cost. And then from that intersection point, they would go straight up to the demand curve to figure out what a person's maximum willingness to pay for that quantity would be. And just like a monopoly, this is not really efficient, leads to a deadweight loss and a markup of the price. But unlike a monopoly, a monopolistically competitive firm does not make long-run economic profits. Why? Well, due to limited barriers to entry, and because these two monopolies, Nike, Adidas, are basically selling the same thing. They're both selling shoes, but just different types of shoes. These two firms can, over time, learn to compete with one another. They can start to undercut one another, try to drop the price, increase the amount of advertising that they are showing the public to make more people buy Nike shoes versus Adidas shoes, et cetera, et cetera. So even though these firms are selling different types of shoes, they still can compete with one another for the same person, and that person is in the market to buy shoes. So firms can relatively easily enter this market and try to brand themselves as, this type of shoe, and it's better this way, so you should buy from me. And because competition can occur that way, this drives down the price of everyone's shoes and it increases the quantity that's produced. So in the short term, monopolistically competitive firm kind of behaves like a monopoly. In the long term, monopolistically competitive firms kind of end up like perfectly competitive firms. So because of this increased competition over time, monopolistically competitive firms earn zero long-run economic profits. And then the last question that I wanted to ask you guys, and I think is very relevant when we're talking about monopolistically competitive firms, is that what are some pros and cons of advertising from an economist point of view? Now, we've already mentioned advertising a little bit so far, but I wanted you guys to really, understand that there are both pros and cons to advertising. So a positive side of advertising could be that you can think of advertising like providing buyers with very, useful information so they can make the most informed purchases that they can. If they know, everything there is to know about this one type of brand versus another brand, they can therefore make an informed decision about what brand that they would personally want to buy from. So because of this, disbursement of relevant information about the different types of goods, this could lead to even more competition, which means lower prices, higher quantity sold, moving us to a more maximized total surplus, if you will. So positive side of advertising could be that information is being provided so the buyers can make more informed decisions. However, a negative side of advertising could be that, this information that brands are providing through their commercials and whatever could not be providing, factual, useful information about the brands, and it could just be to manipulate people's tastes and promote brand loyalties in some cases. So this type of tactic could be psychological rather than informational. And if this is the case, you know, if Nike and Adidas are running ads that appeal to, you know, people that have always bought Nike and people that have always bought Adidas, if they tailor to those type of people in these two kind of separate bubbles, then the people that have always bought Nike are going to continue to only buy Nike, and the people that have always bought Adidas are going to continue to only buy Adidas shoes. So if this is the case, these two kind of companies stay their own monopolies. Adidas and Nike don't have to compete with one another anymore because they've created this brand loyalty in their own separate bubbles. So this could potentially lead to less competition, which means higher prices and lower quantities sold. So these are all the questions that are relevant for you to understand about monopolistically competitive firms.